Hey everybody, welcome back to Feedback Loop. I'm Joey.
And I'm Jeremy.
And this week we're listening to an album that I recommended last week called 1979 by Deru. And I'd heard a tiny snippet of like one of the songs of the title track of this album and was like, you know what, I'm kind of vibing with this. I guess I'll recommend it. So here we are, I guess.
Yeah, and what a recommendation it turned out to be. I like it because we talked a little bit recently, and we talked a little bit not so recently as well about trying to make this more of a discovery kind of thing for us instead of just sharing music that we've already listened to. So I think we're both kind of hoping to go into more of that. Not that we're never going to do albums that we've already listened to, because we still have a long list of albums that we want to share with each other. But yeah, this was exciting, and I guess we're just gonna get into it. It's gonna be a quick week. So for context, this is an mostly completely ambient album. There are no vocals. There's no lyrics for the tracks on this album, so should be a quick episode. Also, slight disclaimer: Joey's feeling a little bit under the weather, so if he sounds a little congested or if you hear weird noises coming from Joey, it's because he's dealing with an infection or something.
If you hear death noises coming from over here, don't worry about it.
It's totally fine. It's totally fine. He's got some sort of plague that spread around the world in 1979.
Yeah, and the only cure for it is listening to track number 1, 1979.
Yeah, which is the title track.
Yeah.
Surprise. I think we already said the album. But yeah, 1979, title track. This is the first track on the album. Boy, howdy. I didn't know what to expect going into this. I had no previous experience with this artist or anything. But yeah, it kind of comes in and there's these like dark gothic synthy keys that kind of immediately put me in this like tragic mindset. Like tragedy has happened. And so this being a mostly ambient album, it's kind of going to be one of those where I'm just kind of like narrating, I guess, my thoughts and feelings of some sort of adventure or some sort of journey through the album. But yeah, so immediately hits with some tragedy, and there's a few like lighter notes that maybe feel a bit hopeful, which to me was kind of like implying that, okay, this is the beginning of the story. Things have the potential to improve, but right now in this moment we're in darkness. There's this kind of like video gamey, vibey, soundtracky kind of aspect to this music that reminds me a lot of Risk of Rain soundtrack.
Yeah.
Which, for those who don't know, Risk of Rain's a video game that both Joey and I really like, and Chris Christodoulou. I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name.
It's a hard last name, but it's an epic soundtrack.
Yeah, he did a really good job with the Risk of Rain soundtracks for both the first and second game. But yeah, this album kind of reminds me of that. There's some like warped organ keys that really kind of like reinforce this down kind of tragic vibe for me. And the instruments are just kind of like peeled back at the end until you're just left with the synth lead, which to me was kind of symbolic of the hero or the main character kind of emerging from this tragedy to kind of start his journey.
See, okay, so I like this because I kind of started off in a different place.
Cool.
So I'm excited to hear where our stories go and where they like go apart. This kind of put me in a spot where it was like an early spring morning in the forest, and I'm like lost, but I don't know why I'm there. And I'm just kind of hanging out. There's dust hanging in the air of like the sun beaming through the trees. And I'm just kind of aimlessly walking around, not really knowing what's happening. And I can hear water somewhere in the distance, and I feel like I'm trying to look for something, but I'm not quite finding it. So I'm just kind of walking aimlessly around. And I don't know what necessarily put me there, but part of the synths or whatever he's playing that is like for the melody, there's an emptiness about it.
Yeah.
That it reminds me of some of the more ambient stuff that like Trent Reznor does with 9 Inch Nails. Not like the industrial rock stuff that he's like super known for, but like some of his, I think they were like the
Yep,
Ghosts
that's what I was
album.
gonna say.
It's like, it reminds me of like that style of music where it's just like there's something about the emptiness in the music, and it's coming through like an old scratchy record, at least the melody is, but then there's other parts accompanying it that are as clear as day. So it's kind of like
Hmm.
there's a dichotomy between old and new, and it just gives it a really cool vibe.
Hell yeah, I agree. I think there's the vibe of this album is very well defined, and it's explored, I think, through each track, which is it's something that's impressive to me as a fledgling musician, to just to listen to this and be like, wow, I'm feeling very specific things while I'm just hearing noise without any real direction necessarily from like vocals. There's nothing being revealed. It's all just kind of vague sounds, and it's still kind of guiding me somewhere. It's making me kind of have a journey or an experience myself where he knows where to make sounds loud, and he knows where to kind of let the silence kind of float and be its own part of the music.
Oh, you mean like in track number 2, Let the Silence Float?
Exactly like in
Hell
track
yeah.
number 2, Let the Silence
I'm
Float.
I appreciate what you did there so much. It was great.
We're gonna get every segue this week, Joey.
Hell yeah.
Every single one.
So this one, it keeps like the warbly and kind of crackly old timey feel of 1979, but it does sound more watery and less like it's being played on a piano. Like the last song, it didn't really sound like it was being played on a piano,
Hmm.
but it had that, there was like a specific note being played each time he was playing part of the melody, and this one kind of it sounds more ambient, it
Yeah.
sounds more ethereal, and it also sounds kind of like a xylophone that's being stretched in a way. And the watery sound of this one, for my story, it puts me closer to water, like the water that I felt like I heard in the last song. I'm closer to it, and now I end up lying down next to the creek, and I'm like in the dirt. Like I can feel the dirt on my back, but it still feels like I'm looking for something, and I'm confused. I'm like really confused. And I can still see the air around me, but then I get up and I'm walking along the creek as the song ends. And man, just the way the song ends, like there's such a big, like, I mean, it has its normal ambient melody that plays throughout. It kind of doesn't really change up too much, and then at the very end it kind of fades out, but it hits you with a big silence
Hmm.
between each note that's coming in.
Yeah, it definitely I mean, the track's called Let the Silence Float. I think it's very much like indicative of that. It's kind of interesting to me that you started in this forest and kind of feeling lost and directionless, I guess, to some extent, even though you have a goal in mind. Because to me, I kind of feel the opposite in that there isn't a very well defined goal, but there is a sense of direction. So for me, this one, it again resembles the first track sound in that it's kind of dark, but it felt a little bit less tragic for me, where it took me to two places. One of which was kind of thinking of this like, okay, he's in some rundown cityscape, kind of almost going to like some gritty, I don't want to say cyberpunk, but some gritty kind of rundown city area kind of a thing. Or alternatively, I noted that it could be in a forest under moonlight, which is completely the opposite of your like your nice warm spring waking up kind of a thing. But it just gave me the sensation of being surrounded by life, but not seeing any of the creatures or any of the people that are emitting, and just kind of the sensation of being watched, I suppose, just knowing that there's life surrounding you, even though you don't see it, you don't hear it, you don't, there's nothing tactile
Yeah,
about it. And then
like
as the track kind of grows a bit empty and quiet towards the end, like you were talking about, that seemed to me, where I guess we kind of both agreed, is that this is kind of a transition occurring where the character is leaving. We, I started using we. I was kind of mixed between describing the character or the hero or myself, and so it kind of all just blended together. And I started using we for I think most of my notes here. But yeah, it felt like we're leaving this place, whether that's this kind of rundown cityscape or kind of forest level, I suppose.
I like that. Like, it's because I'm kind of feeling like I'm looking for somebody. I don't know that, like, but that's kind of how I feel.
Yeah,
And yet you feel like you're stuck in the middle of so many people. Like, I'm looking for somebody in the middle of nothing, and you're in the middle of so many people, but you can't see anybody. Like, that's a
yeah,
cool difference there.
yeah. The main goal for me or my character in this album, it definitely seemed like I was seeking out revenge or vengeance, I suppose, for the tragedy that started the story. And I couldn't define what that tragedy was, whether it was like, my village being attacked or my wife being killed or whatever it is. There's something that started the story in tragedy, and now I'm out to kind of resolve that without having a specific end point, which is kind of fascinating.
Yeah, it's super cool. Like, the way that you can, I don't know, I feel like it's kind of like a deep dive where they, in the past had, I don't know, like the ink blot papers
Yeah.
where they're like, what do you see? And this is the music version of that,
Yeah.
where it's
And
like, how
I
do you
think
interpret this?
I think that's true of all music to some degree, but it really shines with ambient music like this. I mean, we did One Tricks Point Never's Replica, and I think we had a similar kind of vibe going with that. And I feel like we've done
Yeah.
another one since then, but I can't place it.
I can't, we did, Loathe, the,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. We had a similar experience with the second Loathe album
yeah.
that we did. But yeah, it just, I don't know, just the direction of the album for me so far, it kind of leaves me with this yearning of like finding out what's gonna come next, what's after the track after that, and what's in the track after that. It's this kind of like addictive yearning to finish this journey, to see how the story plays out in my mind.
Well, then let's find out where it goes in track number 3, Addictive Yearning.
Hell yeah,
Hell
killing it already. We're
yeah.
keeping, we're gonna get it every single track.
Not gonna miss
There's
one.
not a single one. This one, there's some ambient crackling, and it could feel, I kind of kept the split of the two possible locations where it felt like there was either some like wind rustling in the trees while we sit beside a fire, kind of calling to that forest kind of setting, or it could also be rain sweeping in the wind and falling on some like kind of tinny metallic roof or car roofs or things like that, which is in the more like cityscape thing. And it feels like something is happening in this track, like a discovery has been made. There's this kind of moment of like realization or a big like reveal that there is something bigger than us, and this kind of inspires us to continue the journey with determination to reach the end point, to reach the destination.
So this one is where, I don't know, you start to have a purpose, I guess, or you're
Yeah,
finding your purpose.
yeah, it's kind of like getting out of the slump of the tragedy, and where you had set out, you said, okay, I gotta get out of this place, I gotta get out of the tragedy, I gotta go find resolution for this. Your heart maybe wasn't entirely in it, and you weren't really sure what to do, you weren't as driven, but this is kind of like the moment that things start to click and you're like, okay, I have somewhat of a plan, and
Yeah.
I'm going to fulfill it because I have to.
Nice. The real hero's journey.
Yeah.
This one, for me, it started out like kind of darker sounding than the rest of the songs, and then the static in the back sounds a little bit like rain, and the
Hmm.
pace of it feels a little bit more frantic, and it definitely amped up the confusion that I was feeling in Let the Silence Float. And I started to follow the creek, and it started building. It started to feel a little bit electric, and it makes me feel like I followed it to a point where, like, now I'm completely lost. Like, I was lost before, but I'm just like hopeless now, I guess, where I'm still looking for whatever I thought I was missing previously, but now I've become just as lost as the thing that I was looking for. And I reach a point where I feel like to continue looking, maybe I needed to be lost to find it. I don't know, but I'm just going to keep moving forward.
That's interesting. So you're kind of melding the realities, I guess, of whatever it is you're looking for and yourself, and kind of having this grander than self kind not really ego death. I know we talk about that sometimes, but like having this almost out of body perspective of what's going on, which I also kind of attributed that there's something grander than the hero or grander than ourselves in this track. So we had a similar kind of note in there. But I do have a question for you, and I don't know if you have an answer. You said you started following this creek. Did you, not that I have any follow-up thoughts for this either, but I'm just genuinely curious. In your mind, were you following downstream or upstream? Were you trying to find the source of the water, or were you trying to find the end?
I think I was going downstream because the way I pictured it in Let the Silence Float is that there was a waterfall kind of nearby,
Okay,
or at least like a little dip, I
sure.
guess. So I guess I would have to be going downstream.
Gotcha. So I wonder if this is like, not that I'm trying to psychoanalyze you or anything, but to me that kind of implies you're wanting to find either the end of your story, or trying to find civilization, or trying to find like a way out of the woods, I suppose.
I'd say that could be right. I don't actually know. As of
Yeah,
yet, maybe I find out in the end. Who knows?
that's
May,
true. Maybe you get out of the woods and we have a celebratory three cheers for existence.
yeah, but we won't know. So I guess we just got to keep on chugging to track number 4. 3 cheers for existence.
Fuck yeah, 4 for 4, baby.
So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and I, I don't know when to bring this up, but it it was around this point in my initial listening, so I wrote it in this note that I started to do a little bit more research into the album.
Hmm.
And apparently, so Benjamin Wynn, the guy who is Deru, he who coincidentally did sound design for Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra on Nickelodeon,
It's
which are
exciting.
two critically acclaimed shows.
That I've
But
not seen.
yeah, I haven't seen them either. But so along with this album, it's kind of like an art piece. He directed short films for each song or
Oh,
each
really?
track. And if you go to his website, you can buy something called the Obverse box that is like a projector that it's like handcrafted or something, and it plays the projections of those movies. And so, like halfway through this, I guess my takeaway from this was halfway through this, I was like, I don't know, I'm having this experience, but there's a concrete version
Yeah,
of what it should be
there
happening,
there
I guess.
is a defined story.
Yeah. But I couldn't find them, and I kind of didn't want to because I just wanted to continue having my story.
Yeah,
But so I'm glad I wasn't able to find them. But that was just something I figured I'd throw out there
yeah,
to kind of like,
that's super interesting. I think I might try and look for those as well, just as like an after the fact kind of thing, and maybe we can talk about it again later after having viewed it,
yeah.
if we even find
If,
something.
yeah, I feel like if we find it, it might not be entirely a legal version of it.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
that's fair.
but who knows? Maybe we'll find a completely legal version of it, and we won't cheat Mr. Benjamin Wynn out of any money.
Yeah,
But as for this song, Three Cheers for Existence, sorry to slightly derail. It was just a cool tidbit that I found.
yeah, it was fun.
But this one, it brought me back to a slightly more hopeful and mellow sound than the previous track. The background noise sounded more like wind than rain, and there's a slight jingling that almost sounds like a wind chime. And the melody is like really light throughout, but there's a very full sounding bass that comes in about halfway that I really like. This track makes me feel like I found shelter, but like not like a house or a building, but like I set up a lean-to made out of branches and just kind of found a seat and started to take in the feeling of the forest.
Yeah,
So it's like rest, I guess.
yeah. I think we both hit a very similar point on this track, and to me, this one definitely felt like warmer it kind of felt like there was this kind of soft light illuminating the surrounding darkness, and this was kind of a moment of respite where there's just this kind of peaceful void amidst the storm. So I also called out those wind chimes. You could tell that there's still movement happening around him, but he's safe. We are safe in this kind of bubble kind of a thing, which gives us time to reflect and find comfort amidst this. And I think this to me was a realization where the last one was kind of giving me drive, giving me determination to finish the journey, to find the end, to find conclusion or whatever. This is kind of a realization that this journey will only progress by our will, right? If we stop going down this route, it will cease to have meaning. It won't exist. It will not progress without us. So it's kind of this thought of like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
Maybe I can stop and find comfort without resolving it. Kind of just not really giving up, I suppose, but trying to be content with not knowing or not finding that kind of justice or vengeance that we were initially maybe seeking out for. But there's also this kind of like, well, there's pros and cons to both, and I think it ends up going and continuing in the next tracks as well.
Yeah. Like the difference between, I guess, being comfortable with like complacency, sitting where you're at, like finding comfort in what you're doing now, or realizing that you have, if you're not going to reach your goal, then what has it all been for? Like that kind of
Yeah,
feeling. Yeah.
yeah. It's just like, do I sit here and experience this peace and hope that this peace holds out and just kind of drink in the calm of it, or do I leave this bubble and get back out in the storm and continue trying to fight against the storm and the weather holding me back?
Yeah, I guess you just don't drink it in for too long. Don't get too comfortable. That's a weird word.
Comfortable? Yeah, I agree.
Comfortable.
I think about that
Because
way too often.
I want to say comfortable because
Yeah,
that's just how I say things, but then I'm
yeah.
like that's wrong.
Comfortable.
Maybe I need.
Anyways, we could talk about it in the next track number 5, Drink It In. Segued
Yeah.
masterfully as usual. Yeah, I always think about it because comfy is a slang. Comfy
Yeah.
of comfortable. I don't know. It's weird. Drink It In. Track number 5 is it's a bit more upbeat and less atmospheric, which kind of implies that there's some sort of action that is growing here. Where to me it meant that I was back on track. We're pushing forward and aware that this is our decision. This is not being influenced by someone else. No one is telling me I have to continue. This is solely our choice to kind of move on. The storm has passed at this point, but that does not mean that the troubles have all disappeared or dissipated. There's still going to be struggle. It's just that particular storm, after finding that moment of respite and choosing to push through, we found out that okay, it's not always going to be like this kind of a thing. So it was kind of a reveal in that we're seeing new places, we're seeing new faces, and some of those people that we're meeting or seeing are going to be helpful, but the vast majority of them are going to be independent and just kind of keeping to themselves as we kind of go about this journey.
So we're okay. So you took this as like the I guess the realization that you're now moving on, and that I don't know. You kind of just took this as like, what word am I trying to think of? Not impetus, but you got the gumption or the gung ho to keep going
Yeah,
after your respite. And I kind of took it in the opposite way,
interesting.
because this song, it it took me to night, and it made me feel like I was stuck where I sat down in. Like
Interesting.
I stayed in one place for too long, and I took time to sit in and check out the scenery, but now I have to wait for night to end, and I'm looking around at this unfamiliar place and realizing that I'm now stuck there until I can move again, I guess. So
That's
it's kind of
cool.
like two sides of the same coin. Like you had the willpower to move, and I didn't.
Yeah, and also you kind of took this to be the point where night falls for you, whereas to me, at least in my mind, when we're out, we've left our bubble, we've progressed through the storm, and now we're on the other side, so things are kind of brightening up a bit, and we're kind of exploring the world with a fresh kind of perspective, and seeing those people that we weren't necessarily seeing in the previous tracks, where I described kind of feeling surrounded by life but not being able to see them. Now we're seeing them. Now the light is shining, and we can kind of get our bearings a bit better.
That's good, because whenever you don't see anybody, you become pathologically bored, and it's just hard to get out of that. Hard to
It's
get out of
true.
that mindset without ever meeting another person.
Yeah, and we definitely don't want to get pathologically bored with this track, so we're going to move on to track number 6. Pathologically bored.
Man,
Killing it, killing it.
what boredom that must be.
Yeah, just being pathologically bored.
Oh my god, all the time. This song, so it continued. There was a light version of this effect, I guess, in the previous song, of this kind of pounding, oscillating
Yeah,
feeling. But this one, it gets continued and sped up. And I think that's why I felt like it was night. Like, it felt a little unfamiliar. And maybe that's what hit me towards night. But it's amped up in this one, where the last song felt like night. This feels like I'm being woken up, like I'm being jarringly woken up. And it sounds pretty unsure. There's like a definite melancholy to it. And I don't leave the camp in this song either. I'm just there, and there's a lot of like twinkly sounds, but they're not like happy twinkly that you
yeah,
think of when you hear it. It feels kind of ringing in a way, but the song feels very stagnant. Like the song is me thinking really hard about the fact that I have made no progress towards what I was looking for, I guess. And that's kind of where this song left me.
that's kind of similar to what I got actually. So for me, I have we're moving quickly, or our surroundings moving around us, where the places and the faces that I'm experiencing are now becoming this kind of continuous cycle where we know we're moving, but we're not sure we're progressing, and we're starting to kind of maybe feel trapped in this cycle of trying to find our way through this, I guess, the next phase of this journey. And it's kind of giving us a temptation to stop again, and we kind of like look around and let the surroundings really sink in to us, and it's again a little bit more reflective, where we're kind of like we've come far, we've pushed through some things, but we're having this realization that like it's kind of overwhelming because we don't know how far we have to go to continue. We've come a distance, we still have a distance to go, but we don't really have bearing on how long this will take. And so it's kind of a little bit discouraging. It's kind of a bit overwhelming and confusing having all of these new things happening around us, and it makes me have doubts.
I wonder what somebody who actually knows how to like contextualize feelings
We need to
would.
get like a dream interpreter.
Yeah, somebody to come in and be like, "Oh yeah, no, that's totally cool. That just means that you have repressed whatever now." Like,
Yeah, yeah, it's symbolic of how you're feeling in the moment. You know, when you say that you're dreaming of being in the forest or in a city, or somewhere out on a black beach with whales dying and beaching themselves, like what that actually is representative of where you're at in life or whatever.
yeah, and I mean, you don't know what those whales are like doing stuck on that beach. Like, they're probably tied up with some sort of rope, and you never know what rope's made out of. Like, is it the twine version? Is it the tape version? Is it like the black
What a
beach? Is it the
what a
tape
weird
version?
fucking dream that would be, if you're just seeing a bunch of beached whales on a beach with tape all over them.
I
Track number
feel
7 is Black Beach tape version.
Freud would have something to say about that.
He would. He would probably have something sexual to say about it.
Probably because that's
You know,
that's you, Mister
tape is
Freud.
implying bondage. The whales are implying your dick. You just got this massive whale dick.
Oh my god.
Track number
Um,
7, Black Beach tape version. I don't know if you have the answer. Why is this tape version? Is there an alternate version out there? I mean, presumably there is.
I'm sure there is somewhere. I couldn't find it. The only thing I could find is that there is a 1979 remix album
Oh.
where he does remixes of a few of the songs, but there's a song called Black Beach Tape Version Remix, but there's not a regular version of Black Beach that I can find.
Maybe he was viewing this album as like a mixtape, and tape is just a shortening of mixtape. So this is the version that ended up getting on. So maybe he had a few iterations, and this is the one that he decided to put on the tape.
Well, that'd be pretty cool. So this song, it starts out with just a pulsing note, and then it's accompanied by another higher note that fully goes into the song. And the way that kind of little light progression hit me after the stagnation of the previous song, it makes me feel like I'm lying down, like I've just been reflecting on myself about how I could let myself be this stagnant. I'm on the dirt again, much like in Let the Silence Float, where I'm laying back against the dirt. But this time, being on the ground makes me feel a little anxious, and I feel like I'm going to start digging. So I do. I start digging behind me, and I like as the song approaches the last minute or so, it gets this really spacey sound that comes in over everything else. And you said out of body experience earlier, which I thought was really weird because this sound, while I was digging, it made it feel like my consciousness was leaving my body, like I'm astral projecting. And it makes me wonder what I found when I was digging, because at this point, I don't know. But I feel like it feels like I found something huge that caused me to kind of like dissociate.
Yeah, that's fun. That's exciting. I Man, that's wild. I like that a lot, to be honest. Like I don't know, the whole idea of having an out of body experience and dissociating in such a grand way is just super fascinating to me. And I think it kind of like there are some themes that we're both hitting on throughout this whole album, one of which that I've mentioned a couple times is discovery. And now you're saying that you feel like you've found something while digging, some maybe artifact or something you've made this discovery that has altered your perception of reality. And there's also this kind of stagnation or this kind of revelation or introspection that we're all kind of harping on. So I think that's super interesting. This one, it did feel more reflective again for me. So it's kind of this cycle of this album to me is just this kind of like making a step, progressing a little bit, and then reflecting and kind of determining the next step. This one, it felt like all of my doubts are present, like sharing a physical space with me, but also all of my hopes. So we have our hopes, we have our doubts, all in a physical realm, kind of inhabiting the same space as my body, kind of a thing. And it felt like this was a point of reconciliation that we need to find an inner peace. We have to find a balance to kind of allow both of them to exist peacefully before we can move on and find our objective at the end of this journey. And as the song kind of progresses and starts to change, to me that was representing the aspect of things falling into place and starting to kind of reach a new state of self-control and calm. And this is the final like moment where I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I can find my objective now. I know where to go. I know what I need to do. I just have to do
Man, you said mine was cool. That's cool. Like
it.
physical representations of your hopes and your doubts. That's pretty fucking badass right there. That's some real mind-blowing shit.
Yeah,
Like,
it wasn't even like, I mean, saying it out loud now, it feels like it's some kind of like anime thing where there's like a demon and like an angel that are like represented, but it wasn't that. It was just like some like undefined physical manifestation.
yeah.
It wasn't like taking a form necessarily, but it had physical space and properties to it.
Yeah. I think that's pretty cool. And I think that's a good way to try to think about, I guess, big topics in your head is like try to give them some sort of physical space. That's something that like I think is helpful in some ways,
Yeah.
just to do in real life, to try to conceptualize like these negative thoughts or even positive thoughts as things that are taking up physical space. That way
Yeah,
you
and then
can
you can
kind of,
kind of sort them
yeah,
in an almost physical way. I guess it'd be metaphysical, but just being yeah, I agree that being able to like conjure images or manifestations in your mind of what is plaguing you and what are your hopes and your goals, and I feel like having a physical reference point for those things can kind of help you sort it and work through that stuff.
yeah. And it gives you a way to stay, I guess, in the present, because if you can see something, it seems more attainable. Whereas whenever your hopes are in your head, you can kind of push them off to the future. But then, I mean, before you know it, months go by and the future never comes. Because if you keep waiting for the future, it's just going to eventually become the present, and you can
Right.
just keep pushing things off.
Yeah, tomorrow comes today.
Yeah,
It's like that Gorilla
exactly.
song. Dragon Break, the future never comes.
Yeah,
Good segue. Good segue. That was smooth. I really
hell
enjoyed that segue.
yeah.
This one, it felt like I was approaching something. We're approaching something. Is this our destination? We're not yet certain. There is some sort of adversity here. Something is off, and we can feel that. We're kind of overwhelmed with the scale of this place and its aura, and we kind of get the feeling that we're not welcomed here. But we must succeed. We must press onward. We must right what was made wrong, the tragedy at the start of our journey. We just have to focus. And so this was kind of finding zen amidst the chaos, whereas previously we would have to stop and reflect to find that. Now that we have this kind of balance, we're allowing ourselves, I guess, to progress through things in real time. We just have to kind of focus all of our efforts and energies on it.
So was that after the culmination of learning things across your journey, like the realization that you had whenever you had the, I guess, the kind of short respite that you had to kind of will yourself out of, and then in the previous
Yeah,
song.
it felt like this was everything kind of coming together, and me realizing how much control I have over the journey here. And I did kind of get there early, just kind of recognizing that like the journey will only progress if I progress in it, kind of a thing. But
Yeah.
this is like the next level of actualization of it, I guess, where we're accepting it completely and finding out that we have more control than we ever suspected over the situation, which I
Well, hell
guess could be, now that I'm thinking about it and saying out loud, could definitely be reflective of my own life in reality, just because that's kind of a similar point that I'm at this year, is me kind of focusing and realizing that I'm in control of a lot of the things that have made me unhappy, or I'm in control of things that could make me happy. I just have to actually realize that I do have substantial control over my life and not just have life happen to me. So I think that that's probably some projection happening throughout the story, is this kind of feeling of like stagnation and reflection and kind of processing that and being able to apply that in my real life, I think.
man, I feel like that's such a cool tool, like
It is.
music like this, because the story may be inspired by your real life, but whenever you have something like this music, it can bring it
It's
out.
like a
That could,
catalyst. Yeah.
yeah, like it could end up being an actual story of triumph of a journey that
Right.
never would. Maybe it could end up being the inspiration for a future song that you
It's
write
true.
or something,
It's
and
true.
something that never would have happened if you didn't have a bit of inspiration or a catalyst to bring that about.
Yeah, music's cool like that, man. Especially ambient music. We need to do more ambient albums.
Hell yeah, I'm all for ambient
It's
music.
so much fun every time we do these.
This one, so for me, it gets back to like the crackly feel. It starts off very slow and singular. The unsure feeling, it continues here. And I feel like the big realization that I had that caused me to have an out of body experience is I discovered a new place underground. Like I have entered, I've been in this natural place outside and just surrounded by nature, the forest, and I have dug through to something that is like completely unnatural. It is man-made, something made it other than nature. And there's a note that comes through with an almost siren-like quality occasionally throughout the song that gives it some really nice tension,
Mm-hmm.
but it also like really builds with what sounds like an actual like real drum structure too, that gives this song an intensity that hasn't really been felt yet
Yeah.
on the album for me. And it ends up sounding almost like a UFO or something, which I think I think that might have kind of informed my brain on where to go. But like I feel like I've reached this completely alien place, not alien like outer space, but
Right.
just like completely different new space underground that I like could never have possibly realized. Like it's blowing my mind, and that's why my mind left my body in the previous song whenever I discovered it. But now this is like my mind's coming back into my body, and it's all sinking in that like I'm not home. I'm in a completely different place, and I'm just like even more lost than I
Yeah.
was whenever I was above ground. It's just like I've gone through this whole journey, and I'm like, I just keep getting more lost. What's happening?
That's wild. Because I feel like we're going in such opposite directions, where I'm kind of making discoveries, and it's more of like finding the path and being more comfortable on it, whereas you're kind of getting more and more lost, and kind of having a cold wake up of, I'm not anywhere near where I thought I was, and I thought I was lost, kind of a thing. Just peeling back and adding layers to that in kind of an opposite direction is kind of interesting. However, I think we might have a similar resolution in the next track, which I guess I'm going to fail the segue just because I want to get on with it. Midnight in the
Yeah.
Garden with Ghosts is track number 9, and this one I think it's interesting. I guess I'm gonna tell you how I concluded my story. I feel
Do it.
like we might end up with something similar though. So this one feels somber again, but it also feels kind of determined for me, where I'm still kind of inspired to finish this. We passed through the bad place, and in this track we kind of find something unexpected, where we're not really sure what we're seeing. We've reached our objective, but it's kind of a mutation or a bastardization, or some like warped visage of our objective, where it's beautiful and it's horrifying, and it grips us and confuses us and intrigues us, and it's maybe an anticlimactic, uninteresting, well, I'm not gonna say uninteresting, but it's not the expected ending, because to me it felt like the tragedy from the beginning has not been avenged, but this is the end of the journey. We've reached it, and we have discovered something that was nothing like what we were expecting, kind of in that alien sense that you were kind of leaning into in the last track, where it's something that like was so unexpected. It's beautiful, it's terrifying, it's just this warped visage of what we thought our objective was, I guess, but which isn't necessarily satisfying,
Yeah.
but it is the end, and kind of dealing with that realization that that things did not go the way I expected it to, or things don't always go in the hero's favor. And this song ends with some like muffled dialogue of a child, or of children, that sounds like it's being produced by like an old reel projector. So it kind of has this home video vibe, which kind of changed my entire perspective on the album. Obviously, I was writing these thoughts as I was going through it, and not like in retrospect. But like, so the end of my narrative has been explained, but I think with this reveal of this kind of home video of children thing, it kind of made me think, and this is probably just wrong, but it felt like this was the artist maybe mourning the loss of their child, where it kind of fits in pretty well with the unsatisfying ending, because you're
Yeah.
not getting your child back, and the starting of the album in tragedy, obviously losing the child, and the kind of constant struggle to figure out how to move on and how to progress and reaching your final destination of not necessarily unhappiness, but it's not the desired outcome, I think, that you had when you went into it, which is kind of cool.
That is super cool, and that's an idea that I wish more media would toy with, because there's all these like everything needs to be wrapped up in a nice
Yeah,
bow, and like that's just, I hate that so much, and that's not how life is. And I
I
feel like
agree.
the story that you have gone through, where you hit the ending and it's like, this, what is this?
Yeah,
This can't be the ending. Is this the ending? This feels final, but it's not what I wanted, or it's not what anybody wanted. Or now you have to figure out how to take the ending and like contextualize it into your
right.
life and into your journey, because it's not going to be all nice and neat where the message is just going to be handed to you or anything. And
Yeah,
that's just, I don't know, a really cool story arc, I guess, if we're going with it that way. But
yeah.
it's just super cool.
So how did your story conclude?
My story, so I'm digging, and this the song, I guess, really informs kind of where my brain goes. There's like this slightly off key horn or string synth thing that comes in to break up the chill start that the song has, and it's followed by some really trilly computer noise type thing that comes in after it, and it makes me really wonder what kind of new place I've ended up. It's very cold and like blue, but not like, it's like a metallic blue. Like everything is super, like, I know you don't watch much SpongeBob, or didn't in the past, but there
Yeah,
was an episode where he cleaned his house, like super deep cleaned it, and his kitchen was like chrome.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
there was like a chrome world or something. Like that's almost the kind of feel that I get here, where it's like everything is just so shiny and metallic and unnatural. And that's kind of this place that I'm in. And it's just like the complete opposite of where I started, the forest that I started off in 1979. The song, it keeps up with the slightly cold feel until it just fades out completely, and I don't really know where I am. I'm just kind of in a new place, and I'm just lost and confused, and like in the way that you didn't have like any sort of real end that you were
resolution. Yeah,
expecting. I feel like that's how I got. Like I'm just in a new foreign place. Like I it made me wonder, is this the place that I was supposed to find? Is this what I felt like I was missing in the beginning? I started off feeling like I was missing something or someone, like I was trying to look for someone, and then I found this place. But what is this place? And
yeah,
so there's just the silence for a bit. There's some whirring, and it sounds like that, like you were talking about the old tape projector of like a child or something. And it makes me wonder if like it almost gave me like a cabin in the woods type vibe, where I discovered like an underground surveillance room or something. But
yeah,
then it made me wonder if it was, and this is me after the facting a shit ton of stuff,
yeah,
but it was like, did I work my way into an unfamiliar part of my brain? Is that what this is? And the old tape reel is like the past or something,
yeah.
and I just worked myself into an unfamiliar part of my brain. I feel like that goes too much with the trope of what I think about a lot, but that it was just kind of me trying to make sense of it after the fact. But I think that also goes in line with what you were talking about wanting everything, like wanting to have a satisfying ending, and
Yeah.
sometimes you just don't. So that's just me trying to put a bow on this and try to wrap it up neatly. And I didn't understand what my journey was, and I didn't understand what this new place that I found was. So I'm just trying to throw something on it to be like, this would make sense, right? But it
I
doesn't.
mean, even if you were to project, because I mean, we talk about it a lot. Well, I don't know about a lot. It comes up fairly often that you feel like you're kind of driven by nostalgia in a lot of aspects. So I think even putting that kind of filter over it, it still doesn't necessarily resolve anything.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like maybe discovering or attempting, maybe it's just kind of this futile, or at least in your mind, kind of this futile journey to try to figure out why you feel like you're so rooted in nostalgia, and then not having this kind of definite answer, because maybe there's nothing wrong with it. Maybe there's not something worth discovering there, or maybe you're still just like, I don't know. I feel like it doesn't give a super satisfying ending either way, I guess is what I'm
Yeah.
getting at, because there's still a lot of like questions left over.
And ain't that just life? You can spend so long trying to figure something out, and then even if you figure it out, it's like, well, I'm in the same place I was before I started
Yeah,
trying.
it doesn't really change anything.
It doesn't help anything. In fact, sometimes it makes it worse if you try to
Yeah.
look for things and you figure out stuff and you're like, ah, it makes me feel worse about everything. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Overall, I do really like the sound of this album. This album is
Oh, yeah.
fantastic. I would love to hear more like it. There were some similar soundtracks that are ambient albums. It's, let's be honest, video game soundtracks that I could kind of relate this to. One of which being Risk of Rain that we've talked about. There were two more that kind of came into my mind as I was listening to this album. One of which is the soundtrack to Below, is a
Hmm.
game that Jim Guthrie did the soundtrack for Below, and it's a wonderfully ambient and kind of stormy soundtrack that's just beautiful. So maybe check that out if you haven't listened to it. And then also, I feel like I say this way too often, but this time it's in a different context. Life is Strange. The musical director for the game is actually in a band. His name is Jonathan Morali, but there's a lot of licensed music, which is usually what I talk about when I talk about the Life is Strange soundtrack. The opposite is kind of true here, where I feel like there are some very similar vibes in a lot of the actual like original soundtrack stuff that Jonathan Morali made for Life is Strange. That is also kind of cool. And I don't know, I like soundtracks. I like ambient music. It's always so fun to like kind of have these inspired journeys within your mind while you're listening to something and just kind of vibing with it.
That's
So
why,
yeah,
yeah, it's just great to have a journey. That's the beauty of ambient music, I think. Like, a lot of people, and I'm not gonna full rant, but like, there's a lot of people out there who are like, it's not real music. It's whatever.
yeah.
Like, dude,
I need
fuck you.
something. I need something with structure and something with words to tell me how to feel about something.
Yeah. Like, don't you just go somewhere in your mind? It's, I mean, a lot of electronic music is kind of that way,
Yeah,
and that there's not like lyrics or any sort of, I guess, framework to it all. It's kind of just building, and
yeah.
it's up to you
More
to
about the
interpret it.
vibe. Yeah, which is good. I like that. Which, I mean, that's honestly how I approach music that has lyrics, as we've discussed several times. I don't really listen to the lyrics so much as to inform how I feel about music. I just kind of like, I like the way it sounds, or it makes me feel this way, which is great. But yeah, 10 out of 10 recommendation. This is a great one. I'll probably come back to it. I've actually been uh, listening to this album as I fall asleep the entire week, just
Hell
because
yeah.
that's what I like to do, because it has that kind of feeling for me. And this ties in next week. The album we're doing is Dummy by Portishead. Neither of us have really listened to Portishead. I've heard one song by them previously, and that song is on a playlist that I was before this week listening to go to sleep with. It's just some like glitch hop kind of music playlist that kind of helps me fall asleep. But replaced that with Deru this week. But Portishead is on that glitch hop playlist, and so we're kind of continuing this theme of discovering things that we haven't really listened to before. So we're gonna do Portishead's Dummy album, which I think is their most well received thing. And I feel like maybe there's something trendy about it, because this past week I saw someone else that I follow on YouTube uploaded a cover of one of their songs from that album. So I feel like there's a TikTok thing happening maybe that's making Portishead trendy right now. That's not why we're doing it, but good on them, because like I liked the sound of the song that we've heard. But yeah, so come back next week. We're going to be talking about Dummy by Portishead. I've said it like 5 times already now.
Well, they'll remember.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Let us know in the comments what you thought of this album, if you've listened to it, or if you have any other video game or other ambient albums, really, but video game soundtracks that are are similar in tone or you really like. Again, check out this album. Check out Risk of Rain soundtrack below. Life is Strange original soundtrack stuff. Like it's all good. I'm always down to listen to game soundtracks. So leave some suggestions in the comments and tweet us and stuff. But yeah, so do those things. Totally not an edited ending. Stay in our feedback loop.
Bye.